A lot of us have gotten to the end of Anthem, and we're trying to engage in the strongholds, the free roams, the
events and
legendary contracts,
the chase,
valor, whatever.
But there's a lot of things going wrong. What could they do right now to make this game better? Starting with Endgame.
Just chasing for loot is fine, because that's what I like to do, right? But when you don't have that many places to do it and you're kind of repeating, let's say, the same strongholds over and over, it kind of gets a little bit old. And yeah, there's legendary contracts and you can free roam, but I don't know what it is about Anthem specifically in the game that exists today that isn't getting me to like keep playing it like I did with like Destiny or with Diablo, which are, you know, similar in style in terms of like loot chase, right? And trying to like increase your, you know, power level and your gear. So yeah.
My answer to that would be, if we want to just say compare to Destiny, which I think is reductive, but for this argument, I think Destiny has the advantage of having like a steady flow. Like you can be in orbit and you can launch straight to a mission and you can get into a groove with it. Whereas Anthem, I feel like you're just being stopped and started all the time. You have to return to Fort Tarsis or to the launch bay after every mission. And so to answer the question of what could improve, like I would like the equivalent of orbit, like go to a Strider or something and be able to launch a new mission from there. Because I feel like, I'm like, okay, 10 minutes of waiting around for people to accomplish things or go to the bathroom, because my friends are always like, well, hold on, I'll just take this opportunity to go to the bathroom. The game is so choppy that it's hard to feel good after accomplishing something.
And I think to build on that point, and I didn't really even think about that frustration until now, is like another point that I think many people have said is, you know, you're getting all this loot while you're playing, right? But you can't actually see or use or try anything until you go back to Fort Tarsis, right? You have to go back and go, okay, cool, I got a masterwork weapon, sick, let's go try it out. And then you're like, oh, actually I don't like this.
Yeah.
So guess what, I gotta go back to Fort Tarsis, swap my loadout again, and be like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Like there's all these little quality of life things that I think they can add, but Endgame specifically, like Destiny had a raid, right? Like it had something for you to do all these dungeons to try to get stronger to potentially do the raid, right? And I know that in Anthem, they're gonna have eventually like raid-like activities, not specifically a raid, maybe like down the road. So I am curious to see what that is. I hope Cataclysms, which I think are coming in March, are gonna be a little bit more than what I think they are, because they kind of did like that mini event during the demo, which was like, oh, there's just Titans spawning in the world and there's a storm.
Yeah.
And then I was like, cool, I killed one. Is that it?
So kind of rounding up what both of you guys are getting at, it's like Destiny. You need to be able to get into this game. You need to be able to immediately see what you're trying to do that night. Like Destiny has a really good loop. I know, you know what you're gonna do in an hour, you know what you're gonna do in a half an hour, you know what you're gonna do in 15 minutes, and you kind of know what to expect out of it. And so a lot of that stuff is so buried in the menus in Anthem that one of the things they need to do right away is just bring everything up to the front of the menu. Like you log in, you know exactly what you're chasing, you know why you're chasing it, you know what you're gonna get. And then, like what you said, it takes you into the free roam. They need to not keep taking you back to Fort Tarsis. Like,
yeah.
The end game just needs to be, you're in free roam, you go to a stronghold, you come back to free roam, you hit a button, you mess with your loadout, preferably without a loading screen. Just like let you get into that flow. Like so many of the things they need to do in this game are just let you play the game.
Yeah, and I think like to your point, I think better challenge tracking would accomplish a lot. Like I think they did a lot to fix the challenge of the Legionnaires, like the tomb sequence. Because when I did it, I had to do it separately from everybody because like opening your teammate's chest or opening a chest didn't count for your teammates. And they fixed that part, which is a very good improvement. But I think like you have to, I think, go into one menu and then a separate tab and then one more tab before you get to how your progress is in that challenge. And so I guess the idea is that you just kind of complete them automatically, but I was struggling a lot with multi-kills because I was playing as Ranger and then Interceptor, and it's much easier as like Storm to get multi-kills. I think it's 5 enemies dying in like a very close amount of time. And so I just struggled so much, and so I just had to keep checking, like, did that count as multi-kill? Did that one count? it kept not counting, and I had to keep going into that menu, so that was pretty frustrating. And I think just being able to see at a glance, like, what am I going after today? Or what am I going after this week when I'm checking in?
So, like, let's say you're climbing Loot Mountain.
Yeah,
that's your
love Loot
thing,
Mountain.
Tay.
Yeah, I love it.
Climbing Loot Mountain. What do you, in the end game right now, what are you climbing for?
Well, you're climbing specifically to try to get legendary stuff. You know, like that's, I think for me at least, is power level like 47, which is, you know, 2 higher than Masterwork. So you're trying to, you know, increase your gear score so that you can do, you know, Grandmaster 2, Grandmaster 3, because those difficulty, it ramps up, right? And so you need to be higher level and have better components, better gear. So a lot of it is, I still don't have some of the Masterwork weapons. I think the Masterwork weapons are actually really cool. I wish they had them earlier in the game, like mid-game, just throughout story. Like you can have a lower level version, kind of like a la, I hate to keep using Destiny as an example, but like, you know, when you got Graviton Lance or Sunshot, you felt really cool and powerful in the moment, and that would have helped my experience get to the end game and then want to find the better version of that, right?
Yeah, like I had no incentive to even go after Masterwork weapons by the time I got to the point where I could get them, that I just like haven't even bothered. Like there's no reason, especially because a lot of the weapons don't feel that good. Like if shotguns felt better to use and felt like they actually did something, I'd be more interested in chasing after a Masterwork weapon. I think like an ability is another thing. I think the abilities are really cool, and I would have more incentive to get those. But I just feel like you don't get that carrot early enough to pull you through that mid-game slump that you can get into.
Yeah, the Masterwork weapons are pretty cool though, so I would say like if you can like bear it, like go back, because there are a few that have unique properties and they do cool things. Like one of the pulse rifles, I forget the name right now, like every time you hit the crit spot, it'll also cause an explosion. So like you'll see like almost like explosive shot.
Lance.
Kind of. And then there's like a scout rifle that does like lightning bolt, like, you know, 33% chance. So that's the stuff that interests me. So, and then also just trying to, you know, kit out your, let's say Storm, for example, a specific way, but you kind of have to get lucky with component drops, right? You have to hope to get the ones you actually want to use, because you can still get other ones that like will help your like shield and armor, and like that's good, but like the ones I want don't always drop, and like they've been tweaking all the drops. Like it was like pretty high for me at one point, then it feels like they nerfed them and they're not as good, and now they're gonna tweak them again, I think. So it's just this forever chase for loot, and it's if you want to chase for loot, right? Because there's not a reason necessarily to chase for the loot other than knowing that you have the better, higher number, and then possibly having some gear that you didn't have before.
It definitely feels like they need more strongholds. Like you need that thing that you're always trying to get to pull you through an end game, and without a raid right now, they just need more strongholds. But also, when you're getting ready for that thing, they need an easier way for you to know what's going on with your character. Like you were saying, you put on a bunch of gear, but there's no like global stat that is just telling you how it's modifying your character overall. Because some of the Masterworks are not as good as some of the lower level stuff because of their roles. Yeah,
it just depends on like what you have. Like you could have something that's like a purple, like epic tier that, you know, adds 35% elemental damage as a storm, right? Which is like, oh, that's really good because I'm using my abilities a lot, versus like, oh, only your lightning does more damage, and maybe you're not even running lightning, right? So it's tough, but that's part of like the reason to chase. It's just, as I mentioned, do you want to chase for that? Do you want to chase for perfection? That's like min-maxing is what I say a lot, and even like Diablo is like, you're basically trying to kit out your javelin to the absolute best that it can be. Because on top of just like the Masterwork rolling, right, you're like, oh, I also want these other modifiers on the Masterwork component to be like the best that they can be. Like I want plus elemental damage, or I want my LB or RB to do more damage, not have 10% you know, marksman ammo, or like, you know, like if you're not using those weapons, it's kind of like a useless stat.
Yeah, definitely. I think I would be more interested in chasing that if I had like different strongholds to try, or like something to use those weapons and abilities on to like take advantage of a really kitted out javelin. Because like I said in my review, I think you have those cool abilities and know where to go with them at the end. Like I don't think Titan fights are that interesting. I think they're kind of frustrating, honestly. And And so I would like to see like a more inventive boss, or like, you know, the strongholds, like the one with the laser robot where you have to shoot the fans. I did not like that one very much.
And that means you don't like 1/3 of the strongholds.
Yeah, so it's I think if there, and it's, I don't want to say more content because that's too simplistic. I just think if there were something more interesting to do, then even repeating it wouldn't be a problem. But I don't want to repeat that one stronghold a bunch of times to get to, how many is it, 50 that you have to get or something like that, to do a bunch.
So once you complete those challenges, you have to go back to Fort Tarsis. What do you want to do in Fort Tarsis? Because this is like, we brought this up earlier, like I mean, yeah, what do you want to do in Fort Tarsis?
I think it is BS that everyone flirts with you and you can't flirt back. I think that's just garbage. That is an insult to BioWare's past. And I think it would make a lot of sense. Everyone, the mechanic flirts with you. The Kristen Schall's character is like questionably flirting with you. You know, people are interested in you, freelancer, and I want to be able to say flirty things back to them if I so choose. Not to the guy who's always talking about laundry and stuff, though. I want to be mean to him because I think it's funny because your character's like blanket mean to him. But I think I don't even need romance. I don't even need whole romance arcs. I just think it would be fun to have some like actual banter with them.
Nothing wrong with diving in, right? Sexy danger. Anyway.
Okay, so fighting the Titans in the end game can be kind of frustrating, and there's a lot of things in this game that just feel like maybe there shouldn't be an end game. Is this a game that needs an end game? I think that's like a big question right now. Where do you go from here?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it doesn't even necessarily need to be a loot game in general. Like, it feels like the loot part is really conflicting with the story part, and I think they make each other worse. So I question if this game if it even makes sense for it to be loot focused, because I don't think combat has the tight enough feeling, like you're not in and out, the game doesn't have like the right flow. I think if it focused on one or the other, it would make more sense, but I don't think the two go together very well.
But Flight's really awesome.
Yeah, Flight is really awesome. I think but that doesn't have to be in an in-game sense or in a loot game sense, right? Like I would just like Flight. I would like to be able to fly a little bit longer. Like even with like a pretty good heat sink, I felt like I was stopping a lot. That's just the one thing I want. Like I would love to just fly and explore and not have to worry about like finding new loot, or alternatively, and like focus on story stuff, or alternatively, forget story, have it be a background that just supports the missions you're doing, and you go off and you find new loot. Like I just think the way it's set up right now, I think maybe it could work. Like I think those two things could work together, but right now, I don't know how you walk it back from where Anthem is, and how it's hard to play with your friends, and it's hard to, you end up talking over each other, and I don't have time to go in and read I would call it a codex, but it's called the cortex for some reason, and then, you know, talk to character. I just don't think that whole thing works. So I question whether it even needs an end game, like you said.
It's hard to get around thinking about the fact that every game has hard settings, and like, does it even justify using the word end game just to play it on a harder difficulty? Like every game has a harder difficulty.
Someone called that a new game plus.
Yeah. and they have a DLC model where apparently they're just gonna, you know, it's games as service, but they're just gonna keep putting content out. Like, is this end game or is this just traditional game making? Here's the game, here's a harder mode, here's some new content in every couple of months.
I mean, it's end game in the sense that this is the end of this game, right? and like, as in like pre this content coming out, it's what you do after story, right? Mm-hmm. It's there if you want to do harder difficulties and chase loot. I'm the terrible person who likes loot chase, so I'm like the person they're targeting clearly.
Well, we've all had our fun with those games, like.
Yeah, well, I still did it anyways. And like I even said in our Slack chat, I'm like, all right, who's level what? Because I just want to be the highest, you know? And that was my motivating factor. And I don't know, I think there's interesting layers there with the loot. It's just getting there is kind of tough, and then trying to like min-max it, you just have to really want to put in the hours to do it. And because there's only like 3 strongholds, there's only so much to do, it kind of makes it harder for me to want to like do that.
Yeah, I agree.
So.
I heard that went badly.
There may have been some punching.
Bad choice?
Sexy bad choice.
What?
Not important. What needs to happen to fix this?